literally write on the contract, we will not test you for steroids. Ensign Inoue, who fought over there, told me they wrote it in all caps. We will not find you. We will not test you for steroids.
That's wild.
And so this documentary is like the gold standard documentary for MMA, like fighters like that were substance abusers. There's so many of them. They were so hooked on steroids. There were so many of these guys. Yeah. And then USADA came along, and then their physiques just melted.
Yeah.
But not all of them. Like some guys figured shit out.
Yeah. Yeah, some were pretty dramatic. Like Johnny Hendricks fell apart.
Yeah.
Vitor fell apart.
Vitor was the most dramatic.
Yeah. He's usually like the poster boy for USADA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the guy that was probably responsible for them getting rid of the TRT program. The TRT program is very controversial because the whole idea behind it was some of these guys need testosterone. It's just like anything else, like thyroid medication. We're just going to give it to them. But the problem is, like, why do they need testosterone? Why does a 26-year-old man have low testosterone?
Yeah.
Well, the reality is a lot of them were on juice. And so their natural endocrine system shuts down, and then they get tested during that time period. They go, oh, my God, this poor guy, he needs medicine.
Yeah.
And so you give him testosterone. And Vitor, like whatever the natural level was, Vitor was at hyperhuman levels to the point where they were worried he was going to die.
Yeah, something a lot of people don't consider about TRT, too, that goes overlooked when it comes to these TUEs is even if you're within the natural reference range, like he was pushing it to super physiologic levels. That's why, you know, he was getting more scrutiny too. But even if he kept his levels at like 700 nanograms per deciliter, and that's like a normal level, that's like a chronic bleed of hormone you're getting all day. That's not going to dip based on diurnal rhythm. It's not going to dip based on shitty sleep, based on excessive training, based on weight cutting, lack of substrate for actually producing the hormones and nutrition while you're weight cutting aggressively. Fucking anything. It just stays chronically at 700 the entire time. Whereas like a natural who has 700 would be like 700 in the morning, it goes down to like 500, 600, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And obviously when you're weight cutting aggressively, if you're a guy who loses, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 pounds in a matter of, you know, a few months to make weight for a event, obviously your test levels are going to go in the gutter too. But then you maintain that entire time. Your performance metrics obviously stay far better. And also, you get a disproportionate drop in SHBG, which spikes your free test to a level that otherwise would never be achievable.
Explain that.
So, like, there's testosterone that's bound to albumin and SHBG, which is your total test. Like,
what does SHBG stand for?
Sex hormone binding globulin.
Okay.
So it's like a binding protein that regulates how much hormone is like freely in circulation to get to target tissues. So if you have a higher SHBG, you have less free testosterone that actually is available to do activity, you know, like do, you know, all the things that testosterone does in the brain and the muscle, et cetera. So if you have this drop in SHBG from exogenous administration of testosterone, you get a disproportionate rise in your free test because there's less of this binding protein to hold on to it. And when you get that disproportionate rise in free T, you get more psychoactive activity, aggression, muscle building. There's a reason why guys on TRT, I guarantee you, hold more muscle than they would have otherwise at the same level on paper of a total T with natural levels.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And is there a way that, I mean, they use carbon isotope tests to detect exogenous testosterone, right?
Yeah.
And that detects testosterone that's coming from wild yams, right?
Yeah, it's kind of ironic how testosterone commercial grade is derived from soy, which is like the complete fucking opposite of what
yams or soy.
It comes from like yams, stigmasterol. I forget all the, like, it's basically like soy derived ultimately at the end of the day. Yeah, it's like Mexican yams, and it's like all these, the way they react it down, it comes from, I think the current way to do it is soy, which is just interesting because that's like the last thing you would think makes testosterone.
Well, soy boy is like, that is the worst insult for someone.
Yeah.
So this this carbon isotope test, which detects wild yams, so they figured out a way to extract testosterone from animal sources. Because I know that was theoretical.
Commercial grade testosterone, like the stuff you get from a pharmacy for your TRT, is all derived from the soy derived. So the carbon isotope of it, the ratio of it is indicative of like plant derived testosterone. Right. So when you do a carbon isotope ratio test and you combust it down and you see what kind of like carbon content is in it when you're checking the urine, you see a disproportionately the carbon 13 to carbon 12 ratio is disproportionately in favor of plant derived testosterone to a point where there's no way a human could produce this through like endogenous steroidogenesis from cholesterol. So if you hypothetically wanted to skirt around this test, if you had animal derived cholesterol and you reacted it down, you could hypothetically get a human looking derived testosterone that's completely immune to detection through the carbon isotope ratio test.
Now, is that just theoretical, or has that been achieved?
Well, it's not like I could pull. It's not like you would ever be able to get that from a commercial company that's going to provide it to you. But hypothetically, if you got, I don't know, from like a medical supply company, you got animal grade testosterone, cholesterol, and then you had a chemist who you hired because you're, an athlete who has access to the resources available to pay somebody to do this, and you had the lab equipment, you could hypothetically manually take that cholesterol and react it down all the way down to testosterone, just like your body would endogenously. And then once you have that, you have testosterone that's been derived from animal-based cholesterol that has a carbon isotope ratio equivalent to that of what looks to be animal-derived rather than plant. And then it kind of like gets around that system.
Has that been done?
I believe so, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
But this is not like there's no papers on this.
They're not going to say this is being done and this is how you do it.
Right, but I was wondering, like, I wonder who, like, is this something the Soviets have done or the Russians have done? Is this something the Chinese have done?
I think athletes in all sports, I don't think it's prevalent, like, especially in the UFC. Some of the people who get caught, even at, like, high-level fighters, like TJ Dillashaw, he used recombinant EPO, which is highly detectable if you're looking for it. So even the highest level of fighters, I don't necessarily think have access to the resources to hire these chemists necessarily, or even think to do this kind of stuff. But ultimately, I do think at a very high level, there are individuals doing this.
Yeah, I think this individual's doing it too. I just wonder if it's been proven that it can be done. Nowitzki, Jeff Nowitzki from USADA was the first person to tell me about it. But his take on it was like, we don't really know.
No, I don't think there's... If you can literally take a fucking yam and turn it into test, I cannot imagine it's impossible to take actual, human identical cholesterol, which is literally what your body uses to make test, and react that down. Like, that's to me, it makes more sense how you get test out of that than out of a random plant.
Yeah, that does make more sense.